This is a discussion of the short answer portion of the first AIS midterm exam for fall 2017. First question. List and briefly explain 3 ways that accounting information systems can affect the income statement and the firm's profitability. Many possible answers here. Gave 3 points for each answer that list an income statement element and references an AIS process that can affect the element. So not just listing AIS processes, but linking them to their effect on the income statement. And if you got 3 answers listed, you get a bonus point to bring you up to the 10 points. So a couple of examples. Your revenues can go up, which will ultimately fall to the bottom line. If the company has better information about customer tastes and preferences, that helps them to retain existing customer relationships and to attract new customers. So that's a positive impact on the income statement. If you've got AIS, supply chain management software or whatever that helps you manage your inventory better, means you keep the right quantities of goods on hand and sell them before they become obsolete, that will reduce your cost of goods sold because you're not having to write off obsolete inventory. You can also reduce your cost of goods sold if your information system lets you have the right items in the right place at the right time, so you don't have to express them from one location to another or go out and buy something special that customer wants that you don't have in inventory. If you've got a better information system, that will help you keep your logistics and procurement costs down. If you're doing things more efficiently by having better information about your selling activities, your administrative expenses, things like that, and you've got better information, you can make better decisions and reduce your SG&A costs. Also on the income statement, if you are carrying less inventory, you have to borrow less money to finance the inventory, your interest expense can go down. So as long as you list 3 items, that will get you full credit for number 1. For number 2, business value is defined as all items, events, and interactions that define the financial health and well-being of the firm. Value may come from suppliers, customers, employees, or even information systems. That's talking about businesses. How does a not-for-profit entity like the International Red Cross define its business value? Well, in order to figure out your business value, you kind of have to have something that's measurable. Not just, oh, we do good works, but how much are we doing in the way of good works? Accepted any reasonable answer that gave some measurable item that's related to the mission of the International Red Cross. For example, they could define their business value in terms of tons of supplies collected and distributed at disaster areas. Can define business value as their proportion of donations delivered to the humanitarian missions and not consumed by overhead. So that's one way they can add business value. They can define business value related to the number of countries in which they're conducting humanitarian missions. Couple of points here. Sheer volume of donation revenue is not a measure of the value provided by the International Red Cross. Increasing the amount they collect is not a measure of business value. The idea is to use that revenue to provide services to the target areas. Likewise, the number of disasters that they support is not really a good measure of the value of the International Red Cross, because if you've got bad weather or earthquakes or whatever are more frequent in one year, you'll have more missions. Good weather, fewer hurricanes striking, no volcanic eruptions. You may have fewer missions that year, but still the International Red Cross stands ready to provide humanitarian services. So any reasonable answer there was accepted. Okay, for number 12, looking at how to implement that class diagram given the accompanying list of attributes and identifying primary keys and foreign keys. The table that was given to you lets you put the primary keys in one column, the attributes in another column, foreign keys in another column, or you could put them all in attributes, but just make sure they're designated as primary key or foreign key. And you can do this in any order, but you need to make sure that you assign all of those attributes to a particular table or set of tables. Starting with teams, logical primary key for teams is team ID, and the attributes, the other information that's going to be collected, the team name and the number of players on that team. And you also want to know what league that team plays in, whether it's kickball, softball, volleyball, field hockey, whatever. So that league ID would be a foreign key that links that team up to a league field. Players get assigned to a particular team. The primary key there, the unique identifier for each player, is going to be player ID, and the attributes that are stored in the player table are going to be the name, their age, and their average. Okay. For games, you've got a list of games. You can identify each one by a game number. Attributes are going to be game date, and you want to know what field it was played on, and there is a separate table for fields, so you can link that through the field ID foreign key. And the leagues, in the fields, primary key in the fields is going to be field ID, which is the foreign key from games, linking to the primary key in fields. That's going to have field location, field name. For leagues, you've got a league ID, the league name, and the league sport, and that links to the teams. Okay, and you can set up some linking tables. There are many possible fields, there are many possible leagues, there are many possible players, many possible teams, and many games. So what you need when you've got those many-to-many relationships is a linking table. So games tied to teams, use the game number, which is the primary key of games, and the team ID of teams to provide a composite link, and that will identify each unique game and link it to a team so they can have the team score in that game. You've got a lot of leagues, a lot of fields, so you have a linking table. Create a primary key for that of the league ID plus the field ID, and that will give you a place to put the number of fields assigned as the attribute. And then players, a lot of players, a lot of teams. Linking table there, the player ID and the team ID, the primary keys of those two tables, will identify an individual with their team. And that takes care of all of those attributes. Scoring on that, half a point for each table that you identified, half point for each correct primary key, half a point for correctly assigning the attributes to the tables, and a half point for each correct foreign key. That adds up to a little bit more than 12 points, so there's some bonus opportunities there. And The last question is asking you to list 3 actions that Target could have taken to minimize the problems that they had in rolling out their ERP system, and identify the additional cost elements that would attach to the actions and the likely benefits to Target from taking the action. Finally, identify which one of those actions would have the greatest net benefits. You can do many possible things here. Gave 2 points for each action, as long as it's a reasonable action. 1 point for identifying the cost for that action. 1 point for identifying the benefits. And then that last point, the 13th point, comes from highlighting the single action with the most benefit. And that's going to be a judgment call, so as long as you had a reasonable basis for it and identified your leading candidate, you got credit for that. So a couple of examples for things they could have done. They could establish better procedures for validating the data during the input process against manufacturer catalogs or other information. That would require additional processing time. That's a cost. It takes time to track down and resolve exceptions, so that's another cost. The benefit would be they find problems as they occur rather than at the end of things when they're trying to run the system and it crashes. Okay. They could also have used data entry personnel rather than entry-level people. Data entry personnel with experience in Target's inventory, so they know what realistic values are, who the manufacturers are, that sort of thing. They're likely to have to pay higher wages for them or take them away from other duties. Both of those are costs to Target for using more knowledgeable people, but the benefit is that they're going to catch a lot of the data input errors. So you have to evaluate that. Is it worth finding and resolving the problems as they arise rather than waiting till the end and finding out the system doesn't work? Another thing that Target could have done is to set reasonable workloads and deadlines. Crushingly tight deadlines, mammoth project, not enough time to do it right. Well, there may not be enough time to do it right, but they sure had to find the time to do it over. So costs of setting reasonable workloads and deadlines, either you would have to bring more resources in, or if you did it with the same amount of resources, it's going to slow down getting the system implemented, and it's going to spill over to delay opening the Target stores, which means you have some lost revenues from that. The benefit is it's cheaper to do it right the first time. And the way that you would implement something like that is actually start the project at a reasonable time, going to a rollout date that's achievable, rather than saying, oh, we have to be going in 6 months or 3 months or 60 days or whatever, and then saying it has to be done, because that pressure to complete a project can produce bad results. They could also have hired some experienced consultants who had done similar implementation projects with other retailers. There are consultants out there who do this sort of thing all the time, and they charge pretty high fees, so that's a cost. Also, the consultants, after the project is over, will go away, so you haven't trained any people within Target on the system, so you really lose that institutional memory for the system. But there is a benefit. It's likelier to succeed, and if the project doesn't work, then you have somebody else to sue. Of course, you never recover through the legal process all of your losses, but at least you may be able to get some compensation for it. And among these different recommendations, the most likely to provide the greater net benefits in this example would be to set the reasonable workloads and deadlines. But those are judgment calls. As long as you have a reasonable answer there, it was accepted. That's it for this review of the short answer questions.